Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Have you ever had a hard time getting somebody to write an SOP, standard operating procedure for something? You know, a lot of organizations have seen all kinds of institutional knowledge walk out the door. And I mean, we're talking about not just the standard operating procedures, but also relationships, connections, all kinds of things that people have invested in their work and that is important to the organization that has left. And a lot of organizations are feeling it. Companies are feeling it. So now people are starting to think more and more about, okay, we've got to get people to write those SOPs. We've got to get people to share their knowledge and pass it on. And we'll tell you that what we're seeing is that the places where there's the most resistance is at that middle manager level. Usually executives, they're wanting to pass on their information. They want to see the company succeed. And if they're retiring, that sort of thing, it's not like they're trying to just take it all with them. They're often wanting to do that. The things that keep them from being able to really pass on all the information and connections that they've developed it tends to be more about the amount of time that they have, possibly just even thinking about it, not really realizing what all they have to offer, and creating a system that will help them to be able to do that as they are exiting. So that succession planning is super, super important when it comes to those senior executives. And usually we spend a little bit more time thinking about those folks and how we're going to plan for their replacements. The difficulty comes in that next level down, usually. People have worked their way up in the company or in the organization, and they're working their tails off. They're often just exhausted. They're often realizing that they didn't get the last promotion or that they would like to get the next promotion, that sort of thing. And they might be still feeling a little bit of that competitive edge. They also might just be feeling burnout and exhaustion, wanting to do what they have to do and just go home because they're tired, which is understandable. People who are managers or individual contributors, they also are feeling quite a bit stressed right now and overwhelmed and are not thinking a lot about transferring knowledge. They're thinking about having to get the job done. So, knowing that this is a big problem, that knowledge transfer is incredibly important and that we're going to be wasting a lot of money if we don't do this right. When you know that, and you know that there are people in resistance to this effort, and then you got to think about what it's going to take to really make that change. So that person might be you. You might have that knowledge, the expertise, the wisdom, the connections, those things that really you might not even realize how much you have to pass on. And if something were to happen to you and you couldn't come to work for a while, would everything be okay? Would your clients, your customers, your team, would they be okay if you weren't there? Do you have people in your teams who have special knowledge that if they didn't show up to work tomorrow for whatever reason, would your team be okay? Would your customers and clients be okay? What is it that you guys have that you need to pass on? So let's figure this out. What can we do? First of all, we need to know what it is. We need to be able to identify what everybody has to contribute. This is very important in general, just to acknowledge, say out loud, articulate the different contributions that people make to the team. If you can make those acknowledgments in your teams for yourself, for others, then it helps them to feel more a part of things and more invested, but also it helps them to realize how much they have to offer. All right, so first we got to acknowledge what they actually contribute. And then we have to see, what would we be missing? Besides your great personality and personal connections, what else would we be missing if you for some reason couldn't show up to work tomorrow for a while? And I recommend that people do this in groups. So either you're doing it as a whole team, possibly 3 or 4 people, at least a couple people, to be somebody else who kind of knows what you do and understands what you bring to the table. And just make a list. Write a list out for each of you. What does everybody have to offer? What is your special knowledge? And what would we be missing if you weren't here? And then you look at the list and you say, what is it going to take for us to transfer this knowledge to the next person? Why does that even matter? And hopefully people who you're visiting with, they understand that they matter and that they matter to the organization. And so that's why we need to have a plan for how to handle things if they couldn't show up. People sometimes feel threatened in these scenarios. They could be worried about losing their job. They could be worried that they wouldn't be needed as much anymore. But one of the things that I recommend is that knowledge sharing be embedded in the job expectations. So if there is something special and important to the job that somebody brings to the table, especially knowledge related, that is something that they would figure out how they can pass on. And by doing that, that should impact the way that they are viewed in terms of annual reviews and how they contribute to the team and that sort of thing. But they need to see everybody doing this. So if they're feeling resistance, they're going to need to see their supervisor doing this as well. They're going to need to see other people in the team doing this as well. So if everybody's on board and they're still feeling a little resistant, it could be because they feel overwhelmed. It could be an issue of capacity. And in this case, what do you do? What do you do if somebody just feels so overwhelmed that they don't know how in the world they would ever take care of this and actually create the SOP? And this is where, if you are a team leader, this is where you come in and you put on your coach's hat and you say, okay, let's figure this out. Let's work this out together. This is a problem that we can solve. It's something that we need to take care of. So let's figure it out. Where do you have margin? Where is the margin in your time that you're spending at work right now? What are the different things? Because there may not be any margin. They might feel like they're completely at max capacity. Okay, great. Well, then let's take a look at each of the things that you do and figure out where we could potentially change priorities. If it could be something as small as 20 minutes a week. 20 minutes on Fridays from 11 to 11:30, 11:20. You're going to work on this. Maybe there's a specific project that you need an SOP for. Great. Then let's think about how long do you think that would take? And here's the thing. The person who needs to pass on the knowledge may not know how to actually create the SOP. And that might be something that they are struggling with, feeling like, well, I don't even really know how to do it. Or I don't know how to write. I'm not a very good writer. In which case, they might need a partner. They might need somebody else to help them out. So again, you with that coach's hat on, you got to assess what is actually holding them back at this point. What do you need to problem solve for? Is it that they don't have enough time? They might be saying that, but maybe it's really that fear that they don't know how to do it. And who can help? What is it going to take? Who can help with the resources, the support, and to reprioritize things if that's necessary in order to get this done? Because you have to decide what is most important. Is it worth putting our time and energy toward taking care of this? You really have to run some worst case scenarios so that you have a real clear picture of what is at stake and if it's worth taking that extra time and energy to go through the process of figuring it out, what needs to be communicated, and how can we help them communicate it. So if you're leading a team, first think about what it is that you contribute and that your team contributes, that if somebody were gone tomorrow, what would be lost? And how big of a cost would that be to the organization, to the clients and customers that you have, to your team? Decide whether or not it's worth tackling. And then figure out what everybody's thinking about this. Do they know what their individual contributions are? Work that out as a team. Figure out what it would take to actually transfer that knowledge or collect that knowledge. And then look at what might be the resistance. Is there any resistance to this? Is it embedded already in the expectations of the job, or do we need to add that as an expectation? I understand that sometimes people feel like that's not my job. You might hear that, or you might have said that. That's not my job. But the reality is that when we're learning and growing and everything is changing, we all have to be somewhat agile. Adding an expectation might mean that you're increasing the responsibilities of an individual, but it's not really significant. It's just a matter of figuring out priorities, setting those priorities for your team, and then putting your coach's hat on and helping them figure out how to get it done. If they understand what they're supposed to do, they have a sense of why it matters, and they know how to do it, or they're given the tools, resources, and support, then they're way more likely to get the job done. Knowledge transfer is incredibly important. Let's not let it slip through our fingers. Let's take care of this. Let's take care of you, your team, your organization, and your customers by making sure that everybody has what they need just in case somebody can't come to work tomorrow. If you are someone who is thinking and making strategic decisions about the future of work in your company, and you're trying to figure out how to tackle some of these disruptions that have come in the last few years, including this workforce that is particularly empowered, then I invite you to join us for our virtual conversations. We are so excited to announce these. We have some amazing guests, including our very own Lieutenant Colonel Marci Toler. Marci leads some leadership development programs for us. She's a specialist in operations. Marci was a commander in a Joint Base Balad in the Iraqi War and won a Bronze Star because she started an initiative and led this initiative for basically the distribution center of Iraq during the war. She led this initiative to save money on equipment, supplies, labor, etc., and saved the taxpayer ultimately nearly $1 billion. But she did that by empowering others to come up with ideas and make decisions based on a set of parameters that she gave them. I am so excited that she's going to be our very first virtual conversation guest speaker. And then in July, we'll have another one. Louis K. Gump, who I interviewed and shared that interview a couple of weeks ago, but he wrote the book, The Inside Innovator, about entrepreneurship. So we're going to talk about how a business can find and empower entrepreneurs, and how entrepreneurs, people who have that ability to take an initiative, a new product line, a new idea, and run with it in your company and build it into something that's important. We're going to talk about that with him and with each other. So these virtual conversations are an opportunity for you to interact with our guest speakers and with other peers in the industry. So we encourage you to come to voiceofinfluence.net, click on the button that says virtual conversations, That will give you a list of the ones that are coming up and tell you how you can register for them. We would love to see you there. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity to connect with our listeners. So, your voice matters. Your knowledge, your institutional knowledge matters, and you can make it matter more.